Hey YouTube, it's Robert Hall, and in today's video we're going to do another lighting on location video. In this series I take you behind the scenes into a real working scenario and I explain to you guys the purpose of the photos as well as all the lighting and creative decisions that are made. Now today's shoot is again an editorial shoot, which means the image that we're trying to create is meant to accompany a story. And the subject of today's story is a faculty member, a professor who is being acknowledged for his work with drones. Now the article's focus is actually on him studying the analytics of drones, so it's not necessarily about being hands-on with drones or flying drones or anything like that, but we did kind of explore multiple options in how to communicate this. Now, one thing that I really want to stress to you guys before I get into the actual images from today's shoot is the circumstances surrounding it, because I think that'll just help you guys understand a little bit more about working in this type of scenario. These shoots that we do, I wouldn't say that this is common for commercial clients, because to me, in other circumstances where I've done commercial and editorial photography, there's generally a lot of time. You're generally communicating your time demands from the get-go. Here, we're not hiring models for 10-hour days or day rates to shoot with us. We are using real-world people who have full-time jobs, who are extremely busy people, so oftentimes our shoots are extremely short. Now I'm looking at the EXIF data from the images here, and our first shot was at 3:11 and our last shot was at 3:38, so that is less than 27 minutes between the first and last photo that I took here. So we're talking less than a half an hour to set up lighting, shoot in multiple locations, give multiple looks. So what I'm saying here is it's not that it's not enough time, it's just that it's very rapid work. And this is almost always the case. We typically have 1, maybe 2 hours to execute a shoot, and there could be 1, 2, 3 subjects in that shoot in that short period. We've done 5 people in 90 minutes before. So we started off this session quite literally by utilizing a drone. Maybe you have one of these. It's a DJI Inspire, I believe. I'm not positive. I've never really worked with that upper echelon of drones. This is really simple work, something that I would call a safe shot. Just like I said in my last video, I really like to start with a safe shot just because it gets the ball rolling and I know right off the bat that I've got something in the bank that we can use. Also, if it's my first time working with somebody, and in this case it was, I had met him about 5 minutes prior to taking this shot, I really like to just give them a moment where they're not camera aware. I don't want to create this barrier with them immediately. I don't want them to hide it all. So I like to instead let them focus on doing something, especially if it's something that they're familiar with. Now I just want to draw a few notes about using this location. This is really close to the winter solstice and it's cloudy outside, so you can see that it's almost dark outside, even though this was probably like 4:30. I think my EXIF data was actually an hour off. So the LED lighting on the inside of the building is somewhere in between soft white and daylight. It's around 4,000 Kelvin, and the light outside is overcast. In the evening it's around 6,500 Kelvin. Now those two light sources are of similar brightness, which just means that if I'm going to show the ambient light at all, then I'm going to be showing both of them, meaning that I'm going to have split color. Now if I introduce flash without gelling, I would have 3 colors. It means the flash hitting my subject would be 5,500, the outdoor light would be 6,500, and the indoor light would be 4,000. So I at least want to gel my light source to either match the indoor lighting or the outdoor lighting. Then we've only got 2 color temperatures. Now in this instance I used a half CTO, which brought down the color temperature of my flash to around 4,100, 4,000, and that allows the flash to balance with the indoor lighting so that the indoor lighting seems semi-neutral. Now if you don't understand how to use a gel to correct color temperature with flash to an ambient environment, you guys can watch this video right up here. But in this instance, the reason that I chose a half CTO to balance with the indoor lighting as opposed to a half CTB to balance with the outdoor lighting is because the outdoor lighting turns blue when I bring my color temperature down and he's wearing a blue shirt. The second reason is because the ambient light is providing some fill light, both in the background and on my subject's skin. So I would much rather have the color of my fill light and my key light match. In this first set of images, we have the AD200 with the H200R round head with a half CTO gel firing into a large reflective umbrella. The only other thing that I had to really watch up here is how all the lighting on the ceiling and the windows and everything interacted with my subject. I wanted to make sure that I had some where my subject's head was in between them rather than being interrupted by a light where a light was popping out of his head. For those focused on environmental portraiture, one of the best tips that I ever read myself was always put your subject's head over a clean background. which just means try not to have a lot of busyness right behind them. I also worked with different heights to feature different parts of the room. The upstairs was kind of a give and take. I really liked the lighting that was behind the subject, so I liked trying to feature that, but I think the drone has more impact when it's really up close to the camera with that low angle. Okay, now I want to take you to the more interesting scene that we got to shoot in. We went downstairs to a cafeteria of the dorm that we are in, and right away that kind of sounds scary, right? A cafeteria does not typically sound like a great place to shoot in. You have chairs everywhere and tables and food and cooking equipment and restaurant signs. Like, it's just not a really ideal place to shoot if you're looking for nice, elegant, simple backgrounds. However, there was one thing that caught my eye, and that is these panels that are hanging. There's actually about 4 different sets of these throughout the place, so I might go back at another time to try and shoot a different set of them. But these ones in particular caught my eye because they're just so large and flat, and they make this really cool geometric shape. But as you can see, like, featuring them in the rest of the environment doesn't really work that well, so I wanted to make them stand out. The first thing I did was drop my ambient settings until all these distractions in the background disappeared. Once I did that, I have what I like to call the flash photographer's blank canvas, which is just complete darkness. Now that everything's dark, I want to add light to the things that I want to see, which are both my subject as well as those cool geometric panels that we talked about earlier. To light my subject was simple. I just used a 32-inch softbox off to the side out of frame. Again, Godox AD200 on the inside there. To light the panels, I used 2 different AD200s, both pointed straight up. One was on a table, one was on the floor, pointed straight up into those panels. The ceiling is really high here, so I knew that there was going to be enough light fall off once I hit the panels that I wouldn't be lighting the whole ceiling behind them. One note here, I did still keep the half CTO gel on my AD200 inside the softbox because I was gelling my rear lights blue, and I figured, well, it's only going to make them more blue, so it's not going to hurt. Now, the blue wasn't just the inverse color balance there. I also used 2 blue color effect gels, one on each AD200, and I used 2 different shades of blue. That way I got a little bit of a gradient effect as I went across these panels. So not only is there a gentle color shift here because we're using 2 different types of blue gels, but there's also a little brightness gradient which just comes from the closer AD200 being higher up, so those panels get lit a little bit brighter than the ones further back which have the AD200 on the floor. Now here I'm shooting with the Zeiss 50mm and I'm shooting at f4 because I want those panels in the background to be somewhat clear. I don't want them to just get really foggy and out of focus, so that's why I'm not shooting at like f1.4 or even f2, pushed all the way up to f4 so that my subject still stands out from them, but it's very clear the shape that they are. Now, these panels are quite high up in the air, which means that I had to get quite low in order to get the subject to appear in front of them. Now, even most amateur photographers know that a low angle is not typically flattering. So whenever I'm taking a low angle to capture something high behind my subject, I always have them lean quite far forward to compensate. It looks ridiculous when they're standing there normally because they're like almost look like they're teetering and falling over, but when you have that low angle, it looks completely normal. Now, my flash did illuminate a little bit of the structures and like the supporting equipment for these panels, so for the final, I just kind of ran a brush over the shadows to get those shadows a little bit darker, and I also popped up the saturation on the blue so that the panels popped out a little bit more. Now, if you guys recall at the beginning, I said this was for a story, and a story about someone who studies analytics on drones. Now, if anybody just saw this image, no, they're not going to think about drones. It really doesn't say anything about drones. However, alongside a story, with the story literally written atop part of this as a page, I think that it's going to make sense. Not only do the geometry of the panels give a mathematical and analytical feel, they're also positioned above him, like in the sky above him. So not only does this look visually cool and have visual simplicity, which is going to work great when there's copy atop of it, but it also has an abstract representation of what the story is about. Okay, I hope you guys learned something from this episode of Lighting on Location. I've got all the gear that I used amongst this video as well as what I use for all of my work linked in the description below if you're interested. Subscribe if you'd like to see more of my videos, and until next time, keep on shooting.